Hey everybody, Methodist Dave here. I want to ask you a question. How is it with your soul this day? Oh, mine is really good. I'm sitting here at the Summers Point Beach. It's 70 degrees outside. It is absolutely beautiful. Sun is shining. It doesn't get better than this. Right across the bay there, you can see Ocean City, one of the old sites of Methodist Camp Meeting Association, one of our historic camp meeting towns. And I've got a story to you today about Brits and Bootleggers. Now, during the Revolutionary War, there was a village up the Mullica River called Batstow where they made cannonballs for the Continental Army. We'll go there one day, but the British had decided they wanted to shut that operation down. So they dispatched a force to go up the Mullica River and close down the Batstow Ironworks. As a diversion, they sent another ship down to Summers Point here, and they sent these boats through the inlet to come land. And right here by this beach, there used to be a sand fort. And a sand fort was a great place to take shelter because cannonballs and musket balls would just land on the sand like a pillow. It could take a lot of abuse. So it was a good, secure fighting location. But the problem was all the men of the village were fighting at the Battle of Chestnut Neck. Well, the women of the village saw these British boats coming across the bay, and they devised a plan to defend the city. They all lined up along Old Shore Road, and they began walking towards the sand fort, raising a cloud of dust with brooms and anything else they had to kick up the dust. As these British longboats were rowing across the bay, they saw this giant plume of dust moving towards the sand fort. Well, all they could think of was the militia was coming to the fort. And if they had gotten to the fort before they could get ashore, they would be under the guns of probably a couple cannons that the militia might have, and they would be sitting ducks right out there out in the bay. So the British turned around and went back. And the invasion of Summers Point was turned back by the women of the village, their children, and a whole lot of brooms. That's a pretty incredible story. The second story I have for you today came straight from the horse's mouth. Now, I grew up here in Summers Point. The house I used to live in was an old speakeasy. It had a full bar downstairs. Brass rail, hardwood floors, swinging doors. Oh, it was cool. And during Prohibition, a lot of whiskey would come into Summers Point. It was a smuggling port. Well, one day, a bootlegger was bringing his load into the bay, and they saw the cutter for the revenue agents coming. Now, they took their load in fishing nets and threw it overboard so they wouldn't be caught. Now, this old gentleman I used to mow the lawn for, his name, we'll call him Mr. G. But he was a young boy at the time, and he watched what was going on, he and his friends. And they took note of where that load had been dropped. So when the bootlegger is gone, when the revenue agents were gone, he and his friends took a rowboat out there, and with a clam rake and a grappling hook, they found where that booze had been dropped overboard. They brought it back ashore. Now they had to hide it. They were building a house right at the corner of Sunny and Harbor Lane, and they had just dug a cesspool and installed it for the house. It's kind of like a septic tank. And they thought, we can hide this stuff in there. So they took the load of booze and they hid it in the cesspool. Well, the revenue agents came. They had a pretty good idea that the kids had gone out there and gotten the load. So the revenue agent lined them all up and threatened them. You kids better tell us where that stuff is, or you're gonna get it. Mr. G said, well, he didn't scare us one little bit. They didn't tell him anything. So eventually he gave up and left. Well, not long after that, the bootleggers showed up. Bootlegger says, I know you boys have my load. You're gonna tell me where it is, right? Revenue agent didn't scare us. Bootlegger, he did. And we told him where it was, Mr. G said. He retrieved his load from the cesspool. And then he gave each and every one of them a bottle to take home to their dad. There you go. So, their dads all got a bottle. They had an adventure. And they handed me a story. There's a lot more stories like that from Summers Point and Ocean City here. Maybe one of these days I'll tell you them. But for today, we're gonna close it up right now because this is just too nice to sit here and film. I'm gonna get out there and enjoy this. God bless you, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care.